All right, so let's do it. Let's crack the code and get down to how we can affect the algorithm. Now, I want to be clear, I don't have special insight to Spotify on how the algorithm works. I've spoken to a few people, I've been to a few conferences, and I've generally gotten the idea of how the algorithm works, but overall, it's changing probably daily. So there is no one way to tackle it. There's more broad stroke things that you can do to affect it over time. First, let's talk about release schedule. So essentially, you're an artist, right? You went to a studio, you recorded 6, 7, 10, 12 songs, however many songs, and you go, okay, I'm going to put out this album. What's my release date? Well, you might want to back up and think about how your release is actually going to go. And I won't get into the minutia of the advantages of releasing singles over time in a broad sort of way to affect your marketing, but I will talk about how releasing singles in a 6 to 8 week period onto Spotify can positively impact the algorithm based off of consistent visitors to your profile. Essentially, it works like this. Let's say you choose a release date, you put out your album, you drop it, you push people to Spotify, that's it, it's over. Spotify gets a little ding, the algorithm says, oh, people kind of cared for a single day, that's great. Well, imagine if you did that over the course of a year with maybe 5 or 6 different singles. Well, now all of a sudden the algorithm goes, holy cow, there's music being posted all the time, and there's people coming and listening all the time, there's new followers all the time, there's new playlists all the time. They're doing really well. I'm going to give them some more output onto the personalized playlist. So my whole point is that the algorithm loves consistent content. It loves singles, and it loves people continually returning to listen to new music. Next, I want to talk about Spotify influencers. Now, when you think of influencers, you're probably thinking of Instagram influencers who have thousands or millions of followers that like everything they post. Well, this is a little different. Spotify influencers are essentially users who have listened to music that's gone on and been very successful. And essentially the algorithm says, okay, this person understands what good music is because what they listen to happens to do very well. So what they listen to has a bigger impact on the algorithm. Now you might be thinking, okay, so we know what influencers are, but how do we actually connect to influencers? It seems sort of like a numbers game. You know, who knows who are listening on any particular playlist, who you're pushing to. Well, I think that there is a more direct way that you can try to affect these influencers, and it's to go where they're discovering music. If you think about influencers as the people who discover good music before anybody else, they're likely going to be in places where good music is discovered. So what you want to think about is publications and blogs. And most importantly, blogs that are very niche. You know, I think that getting on Paste, Pitchfork, Pigeons and Planes, Billboard, Rolling Stone, those are going to be publications that are going to help you. But ultimately, I think that the influencers are scrounging at the bottom of the barrel. I think they're going to their favorite small blog, the guy that's receiving music and scouring through thousands of songs a day to find the best. That's where they're going. That's what they want to listen to. There's no commercialism that's affecting it. It's very niche. And getting onto those blogs, I think, is important to affecting those influencers. Another factor in that is Hype Machine. Now, if you're not familiar with Hype Machine, it's essentially a website that aggregates data from small blogs, sometimes slightly bigger ones, and decides what's sort of happening in the publication world. It's a super popular site that was once probably overestimated, and now it's a little underestimated on its importance. But getting on there, getting high on the popular chart absolutely has an effect, and I've seen it on what happens on Spotify. Because essentially these influencers are crawling in Hype Machine, they're finding music, they're going to Spotify, and then they're adding it. Since they're already influencers, that music is going to have a bigger impact on the algorithm. Now, there's also some data-driven factors that definitely play into the algorithm. There are hard points that I think the algorithm and curators look at when it comes to your music. One, I think the most important one is your skip rate. I think that this is probably the biggest indicator of whether your song is good. Now, unfortunately, you don't get to see the skip rate, but it definitely exists. And if people are skipping your song, it's not going to be put on to Discover Weekly, or at least not in a strong way. When curators take a look at it, they're going to see it and sort of decide maybe not to put you on a playlist. Unfortunately, there's nothing you can really do about it other than just write a really killer song. Now, of course, playlists are probably the strongest way to affect the algorithm because it checks off so many of the algorithmic checkboxes. For one, we're getting straight up streams. We're connecting to people directly who probably have never heard your music before, and it's giving them the opportunity to not skip your song and save it. We're also playing sort of a numbers game with the influencers. The more playlists that you're on that are active, the more likely it is that you're going to hit some influencers that might help along the algorithm. Also, finally, the number of playlists might actually have an effect on the algorithm as well. Another factor I just sort of touched on is saves. Obviously, people saving your song to their personal library definitely has an effect on the algorithm. And finally, we have followers, and we're not 100% sure about how it directly affects each individual release, but we do know it affects your release radar. People who follow you will most likely get your song in their release radar. And these are people who are dedicated fans. These are people who have been listening to your music enough that they want to follow you. They're more likely to listen to the whole song, and they're more likely to save the song. So that pretty much covers it for algorithms. And I know from here on out, we're really going to be focusing in on playlists and how to find them and how to tackle them. But I want you to keep the rest of these pieces in mind, because if you can create a strategy to get on more blogs, get on Hype Machine, get people to save your song, get people to follow you, it'll really support your playlisting efforts.